No, it's, yes.
Okay. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Taylor. I'm a PhD student. I'm stepping in for Dr. Jennifer Thompson today to introduce our speaker. But first, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. So the University of Calgary, located in the heart of Southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Suzanne Tough, who is the principal investigator of the All Our Family Study and is a professor within the departments of Pediatrics and Community Health Sciences in the Cummings School of Medicine at the University of Calgary. Dr. Tough is also a member of the Max Bell Public Policy Institute. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Tough.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's great to be here today. I love it how people are in the way back corner over there as if they can't be asked questions or can't be drawn into the conversation. But I've learned everything except for how to switch the slide. Oh, there we are. Great, 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 great. Okay, so I'm delighted to be here today to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing in our lab over at the Orco Center for almost a quarter of a century now. And we're going to talk about a simpler way to do this. Cultivating resilience and flourishing in everyday life. And so I'm hoping that you'll all leave with something that you didn't know, an affirmation of things that you intuitively know to be true, but now we have measured over time. So the importance of them might become more salient. So today we're going to talk about our health and stress with some data from our work on how Albertans are doing. We'll distinguish between resilience and flourishing, and then bring some evidence to bear from the work that we've done in our lab around how we can address that through the 3R approach. And then end with a resource that we hope you'll find useful for you or your families or friends. And if I'm really astute and timely, we'll have lots of times for questions and discussion at the end. So our health and stress, a common topic, you see it in the Calgary Herald, you see it on the news, and what does it mean? Well, the World Health Organization describes health as a state of complete well-being. And I appreciate that almost everybody here has an understanding of that already, that we're beyond thinking that physical well-being constitutes health. And it's of importance to individuals, communities, and societies because health transcends our ability to create healthy communities and civic society. But stuff happens. We have adversity, it's inevitable. And it's defined as a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. In my area, we often talk about that in terms of adverse childhood experiences. In other areas, we can see it across the life course when difficult things happen and they create hardship or trouble. One thing, though, that you might be misled in the media is that adversity is probabilistic. It's not deterministic. And so you can't simply add up the number of adverse experiences you've had and say, well, this person is wounded or has challenges in managing their life in daily society. So why is it probabilistic and not deterministic? And why is it part of the human experience? Stress is also part of the human experience. And when stress gets under the skin, we activate our sympathetic nervous system, simply put, and I recognize many of you are fully aware of this, and we have the fight or flight response that then enhances our ability to experience inflammation, which challenges us in our mental health, and then predisposes us to illness or chronic disease. And what we often talk about in lay literature or even in common practice is the animation of the fight or flight response that we can't turn off. And the problem with that is when we're in this hypervigilant state, It's very difficult to access our executive function and make the best possible decision in the course of our activities of daily living. It also increases the likelihood of long-term challenges. The parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest system, is often overwhelmed by the fight or flight system. And one of the activities that we want to create in our habits of daily living is to how do we balance this out so we can access our executive function to make good decisions in difficult times, recognizing that challenges happen. So how are we doing? Well, we're post-COVID. We've got a pretty dynamic political climate right now. So the background level of stress is already above average. And I'm going to share with you some of the work that we've been doing for some time now in the All Our Families study. In 2008, we recruited 3,200 families into this study. Women were pregnant at the time and agreed to participate in contributing information via survey and biologic samples. We have followed these women up over time and followed up their children to the point that you can see on the slide here. We are now post-COVID and the youth are completing their own surveys. Some of our areas of interest in the women's health component has been the intersection between women's well-being and how they're feeling in terms of life satisfaction, as well as women's well-being and child development. So the intersection between how well families can thrive in the midst of activities of daily living. You'll notice here that in the study, and this is important for those of you that are not life course epidemiologists, who's in the study? Because who's in the study is going to help us understand what the answers mean and who they refer to. Well, the majority of these women are educated beyond high school, which is an alignment with most Alberta and Canadian data. Most of them are currently attached in their relationship, which is the same as most Alberta data. 60% earn at least $102,000 a year. So that means 40% are living with a family income of less than $102,000 a year. What does that mean? Well, the median income in Calgary is $100,000. So that means that 40% of the sample represents most families most of the time. The sample is most families most of the time, with some slight adjustment for some high income earners. The average income is $130,000 a year, which is approximately the average family income in Calgary. Mm-hmm.
Just clarify all your.
Oh, that's a good question. These are all urban residents. The focus was a Calgary recruitment area, and about 30% were not born in Canada, and about 20% do not represent white Caucasian families. And we haven't looked at biracial constitutions of families, which other people could say would be an important thing to look at, but we'll look at that shortly. So thank you. So what's happening to these families? Well, one of the core things that's become really salient to our team is not whether or not these families can afford to pay the bills, because although 12% are food insecure, the majority are food secure and housing secure. But almost 80% feel time crunched. So I would just offer to you that one of the current poverties of our time is time. And I'm seeing some nods. I mean, we often have the resources, but we don't have 15 minutes. And I hope by the end of us, I'm going to convince you that you don't have time not to take the time to figure out whether you're on your own path. And time crunch is defined as feeling rushed, busy, or pressured, and it's based on our perception of needing to get things done. The challenges with time crunch, which is somewhat associated with experiences of partnership tension or mood or a sense of resource constraint, is that, again, it impacts our ability to access our executive function to make those good decisions when we experience the hiccups of daily life. I want to go back to the cohort study and just say that I'm deeply grateful for these women who have stuck with us since 2008 to this point in time. So we've been able to look at things that happen before an event occurs, to look at risk and protective factors for when things happen later on. And the focus of our program is on identifying things that you can modify early to reduce the likelihood that you're going to have poor mental health or experience dissatisfaction or alienation from your community. And so without them, we wouldn't be sharing this data. They're midlife now, mid-40s, and they're telling us right now in this point in time, 2023, 2024, 2025, that they have high life satisfaction. They feel that they belong to their communities. They're happy in their relationships, and they have adequate social support. That's a really good news story because, as you'll hear as we go on, those are some of the key components of well-being. This is also in the midst, though, of tremendous is an exaggeration, of a high proportion of them experiencing depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress. And I'll just offer that these levels of depression, anxiety, and stress are about double what they were in the pre-COVID period. So when we started the study, 2008 to 2018, we were seeing symptoms of depression and elevated symptoms of anxiety in the 15% range. And we haven't seen this go down post-COVID. So life is complex. There's a variety of life circumstances. I mentioned most of these women are employed, 75% are working full-time. And I would say that one of the common pieces of feedback we get is they're really just overwhelmed because they're also a lot like Diane here. Diane would be an example from our study. She's in her late 40s. She's married with 2 children. She's an engineer. Both her and her partner are working full-time. She has one child that has some learning needs, another child that's an active athlete. She's adjusting to aging parents, and she's perimenopausal. And we have no contemporary precedents for women being in this position because the momentum towards delayed childbearing has shifted the experience that women have at this stage of their life. And I'll also add to this that many, many people like Diane are also at the peak of their career. So they are managing responsible positions in the workforce, managing their adolescent behavior. And some of you might know that the adolescent brain is its own mumbo jumbo of things. And then they have aging parents whose needs need to be met somehow between her and her partner. So this is all part of the contemporary challenges that we're facing. So stress is part of the human experience, but too much is too much. And overall, women are still reporting, and this is kind of a component of their resilience, they're pretty satisfied. They thought this is where they might be in their life, and here they are. But the mental health challenges are real. We ask youth, and I'm not going to talk about the youth today, but the youth are feeling pretty good about their academic and physical well-being, but not so good about their mental health. And I'll just add in here, that's important if you're parenting somebody. 40 to 50% of the youth in our study say they don't feel that they belong at school and they don't belong at home. So that's a big job. So, the problems, I think, are well described, and I'm hoping that I can offer some of the solutions. And I'm just going to digress a bit. When I was introduced, you'll notice I'm a member of a public policy institute, and I've worked as a scientific director for a number of years. And I've had the privilege of working with a number of bureaucrats. And one of my mentors was just really influential. And she would always say, quit admiring the problem. Like you academics, you want to delve into the problem, but what we need are solutions. And so this slide always reminds me of, so what? And so the so what problem was on my mind and has been kind of part of my own vision. And we went and asked these women in our study, what do you need from us as academics? You've gifted us your time for well over a decade. And they said, well, we want to know more about what the evidence is showing. And I thought, oh, I mean, they get all the abstracts, they can see all the publications. That's not really communication. That's an academic vehicle. And so we looked back at all the data we had and had published over time, like how well children do at school, what is maternal separation anxiety, how mothers transition back into the workforce, to find the risk and protective factors that enabled families in difficult circumstances to feel a sense of competence and to avoid the worst possible outcomes. And that led to the development of our resilience and flourishing work. And what's the difference? Well, resilience is the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from a difficult circumstance. The flood was a good example of how communities came together to act towards overcoming the immediate danger and the immediate threats of what was happening in their neighborhoods. We had a lot of resilience in that point in time. And we see it in our own activities of daily living. We might get anxious before a test, and we have found ways to navigate through the test-like situation to come out the other side and carry on with our life. But there's more to life, I believe, than just being resilient enough to manage these adversities. Excuse me. And this is not new information, but there's also an opportunity to flourish. And flourishing is the optimal and continuing development of the well-being of human beings and their potential. And so our team is focusing now on flourishing as a highly desirable outcome in contemporary society. Oops. Resilience is important because it helps us meet our basic needs, and it's a really critical experience in terms of developing life skills. It helps us cope with short-term unexpected issues and the daily hassles, getting stuck in traffic, getting our kids to school on time. And it enables us to minimize the fight or flight response because we know how to combat these activities of daily living or these things that happen to us over time. What is flourishing? Well, flourishing is subjective, and I'm not sure yet we would say that flourishing is generalizable across culture, but I'm going to speak to our Western culture and how it's been described since the beginning of time with great thinkers like Aristotle, followed up by a number of psychologists and other thinkers. Contemporary flourishing research is its own domain of work. There's a Center for Flourishing at Harvard. And so we're really wondering, what does it look like to experience environmental mastery, positive relationships, a sense of autonomy, personal growth, self-acceptance, and purpose? And it's important because people who flourish or report flourishing have lower mortality rates, less chronic pain, fewer long-term health conditions. And an example would include optimistic individuals having lower rates of cardiovascular disease. That's all things being considered. That's controlling for income and experiences of discrimination and mental health. And you can have flourishing in the presence of things that look very difficult. You can ask cancer patients if they feel like they're flourishing, and you might get a yes. You can ask people going through a difficult transition at home or the loss of something dear to them, and they can still report that they feel this sense of purpose and this sense of belonging. And that's important to the development of human potential. Are we flourishing? Well, our women, in spite of everything I've said, yeah, you know, we're doing not too badly. And some of the things that enable them to flourish are a sense of connection to their community and to their social support networks. Those who had more stress, experienced discrimination, or food insecurity reported less flourishing. But I just want to emphasize that the experience of income inefficiency does not outweigh the benefits of social support. So a lot of time in the public health literature, you'll hear people say, oh, it's the social determinants of health. That's the problem. If they just had more money, then they would solve the current crises. Our data, I think, would suggest that that's not entirely true. We need adequate resources, there's no question, But that is not the solution to a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. So let's look at stress. Let's try to look at stress. Okay, so this illustrates when we are able to manage our stress, the benefits of activating a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So we have more oxytocin released, our feel-good hormones are more accessible to us, we feel a better sense of calm, and again, to the ultimate purpose of being able then to use the best part of our executive function when we need it. The yoga pose is interesting in here, and it's somewhat intentional because a lot of the breathing practices that are advocated in some of these techniques really activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Another example of that is maybe when you were all small and you came home frantically after being hurt physically or emotionally, and somebody said to you, "Can you calm down? Just take a deep breath." The deep breath really matters, like it does something to our body. And so all of those euphemisms ultimately, or many of them, have a role. So what did we do about it? And I don't know why I'm flustered today with moving this to the next slide. So the women said, what are we going to do with all this information? And we developed the 3R approaches to well-being. And the physiology of these is to better understand that those who develop strategies to manage challenges have less activated stress response systems, and they experience more life satisfaction. And the 3 R's are routines, resources, and relationships. And you'll hear that repeated throughout the talk. What is a routine? Well, a routine is defined as an action or thought that we regularly follow and repeat. This example is an example of a structure that somebody might implement in order to increase the likelihood of a good night's sleep. You might set your alarm for 9 o'clock. You might take a deep breath, and then you might get the reward of a good night's sleep. Another routine, though, is one that Hillary Clinton really emphasized. She didn't think about what she was wearing. She had the same routine in her suit that she put on every day, and then used her executive function to move thought and humanity forward in a way she thought best. She did not waste her intellectual effort, she's one of many, on something that she could make a routine of. But why do they work? Well, they help us use time efficiently. They reduce decision-making fatigue, again, all about managing how well we feel in our day-to-day activities and reducing the stress response. Frees up energy and brain power. It's protective for positive mental health, and it can help us build connections because often our routines involve doing something with somebody else. So we won't do this today, but if you take a look at the workbook, which is available at no cost on a website that we will make available to you at the end, you will see that you can go through activities that remind you or help guide you through your own routines to both identify where ones can be of value, but also identify maybe things that you can discard, thinking back to the sense of time crunch. Resources, why do we need them and what are they? Well, these refer to our communities and other places we spend time. They're often called in the not-for-profit sector third places, and they are easily available, no-cost settings where people can gather. Resources are important because they provide a place to go to be with people with whom you may have a shared interest or a shared goal, and they facilitate the development of life skills. And life skills are crucial for launching into adulthood with a sense of competence. And when you have a life skill that enables you to participate in a group, you're more likely to feel a sense of belonging, because we have a need for reciprocity in the human condition. And it's important then that we enable our adolescents and young people to develop the skills that then enable them to be part of our civic society. Not all resources are about skill development. Some of them are about shared enjoyment of walking or shared enjoyment of being together. And that's equally important. And I'll speak more about that later, I think. We have time. Why do resources work? Well, they increase the likelihood that we're both going to get this little oxytocin boost. So I smile at you and you smile at me, and we don't have to say anything, but we both feel better because our physiology responds to that gesture. It decreases the secretion of stress hormones in our minds and bodies. And one thing that you may be aware of or may have experienced is, of course, the minute you're focusing on something other than yourself, you're not actually focusing on the things that are creating distress for you, because although we can shift our point of attention, we can't actually hold two thoughts simultaneously. And that's why you'll hear in a lot of the literature around how you overcome your own sense of lack of well-being is to get out and clean up your neighborhood or join a book club or participate in a garbage cleanup, because really those activities distract you from your current condition in a way that enables your oxytocin to get a chance at helping you feel better. Resources allow us to use our brain energy for more complex tasks. It enables skill development, builds knowledge of our local environment and broader environments, contributes to a sense of empowerment and a sense of community. And we need a sense of community because it facilitates a sense of ease and well-being in our own environment, and then also settles down the fight and flight response. When you know your neighborhood as a safe place to be, you feel more comfortable moving about it and greeting people in your neighborhood or the dog park. You've probably all heard about the let's just get out in nature and go for a walk. But why does that work? Like, one of the things in developing this workbook that was important to me is it's not what you do. Lots of us know what to do, but I felt or believed that knowing why we do it could be an impetus to action. So why is being in green space of relevance? Well, it activates a part of our nervous system, the parasympathetic, that is important for rest, relaxation, and healing, reduces wear and tear in our bodies. But there's a lot of work in the attention restoration theory world that reminds us that when you're in nature, your cognitive focus is lessened. So you soften your gaze around lots of things. And that also enables your parasympathetic system to have a chance to reset or rebalance. Now we're going to talk about relationships, the third R. So we've done routines, resources, and now we're at relationships. And we have close relationships and less formal or distant relationships. Our close relationships are those that you would all identify as being family, friends, romantic partners, or groups that we problem solve with. These work because they enable a place for us to exchange knowledge and feelings and bring a sense of meaning to our lives. This improves our sense of mental well-being and our sense of trust. It enables in deep, close relationships also to have the trust to reset our perspective on something that we might have gone wide on. So if you have a really trusted friend and you're way out on the wild side, your trusted friend will help you bring it back in closer to a place that's more anchored in something that you can do something with. This is really essential. And some of the, I won't talk about the lonely literature now, but anyway, if each of us could have a friend, if somebody in our life that was so generous with their own well-being to help re-anchor us without threat of losing the relationship, we would all have a chance at gaining that knowledge and trust and maybe then accessing a better solution to a difficult circumstance. There's a number of different kinds of support that are enabled in close relationships and in some distant relationships, and these include emotional, tangible, and interaction support. Our team has looked at these to try to untangle, if you were going to have a modifiable risk factor, where should you put your money in the bank? And we've been unable to distinguish which one is more or less important. And Erin Hetherington did quite a bit of work on that. And our conclusion is we all need each component of these at some point in time. So breaking down social support into its component parts doesn't really solve the intervention problem. Informal relationships include those that you might have in your neighborhood. I mentioned the dog park. You might see somebody at the coffee shop here periodically that you say hello to. You might say hello to your barista. And these are important as part of our social diet. They involve an exchange of implicit knowledge and feelings. Sometimes they include skill building. You are allowed to feel a sense of connection or shared experience in these. And they're typically also important components of how we feel good. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but there's more on our website. So these informal relationships, we've coined and worked with the community, our community partners, into social snacking. So these are brief things you can do every day, and I would encourage you to do every day, like saying hello at the dog park, hello to your barista, and they contribute to this sense of happiness, because I can't greet you with a smile and you smile back at me and not both of us feel better. And if you conceptualize that you have 100 pennies of emotional currency a day, and you have to lose 20 of them just getting from out of the bed to work because the barista's rude and the bus driver's rude and nobody talked to you at the bus stop, then you're starting from a deficit before you even get to the part where you really want to engage your best self. And so the more of these positive, brief social interactions we can create and participate in, the lighter we're going to feel, and the more resources we're going to bring to bear on those things that require our highly focused cognitive attention. So what did Diane do? We described the circumstance, and she came with us on one of our 3R workshops. And at the end of it, she thought, well, I think I can maybe shift things around here. So she sat down and problem solved with her partner around some of the challenges she was experiencing. They were able to find a way to facilitate access to the swimming pool with other parents that are also in a similar circumstance. Another reason you want these informal relationships is they provide these vehicles for problem solving in simple ways like this. She connected with her son's school counselor to find out if there were resources to help him improve his behavior, to be more welcomed at school. She found a seniors coffee group for her aging parents and sent them an Uber to get them back and forth. So that was off her list. And found some more community-based in-house support for parents, which is fairly readily available in contemporary society. And she actually even found she had a few minutes to add a health routine to her life. When the women asked us what we could put together around this, and I didn't want it to be just an academic book of facts, we created the 3R workbook, Cultivating Resilience and Flourishing. We describe what they are, why they work. There's exercises and activities that guide them through things you can do in your daily life. And just as a reminder that this can be done without a huge amount of investment, like 5 minutes of reflection can provide insight into something that you can then consider making a shift around. The workbook is based on a reduction of the wear and tear in our bodies and minds, and offers the opportunity of enhancing well-being. And we would welcome you to use this workbook. I've got postcards here that we'll hand out. The QR code will take you to not only the workbook, which we have in a color fillable PDF, but also a black and white PDF. And then for those of you that just want the fast facts, we've taken the worksheets out and created just the worksheets, both in color and in black and white. And we would love to be invited or talked to about presentations and workshop. I'm here today with my colleague, Dr. Jessica Walsh, and she's worked with me on this for a number of years now, and I'm sure would be also happy to help in any way that we can. There's our references and just a recognition of our contributing authorship team, and another shout out to the women in the studies that have really helped us think harder about the data we've collected to make it usable in their own place of work and play and in our communities. And an acknowledgement to our funders, the Burns Memorial Fund and Max Bell Foundation supported me and my colleague Nancy Reynolds in a policy fellowship, which enabled the development of material relevant to communities and community resources in the social snacking work. So I think that gives us about 10 minutes for questions, and I look forward to any way that we can contribute now.